Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Secure Yourself from Midnight Blizzard Attacks. My name is Emily Crouch and I am a marketing manager here at CoreView. Just while we wait for a couple of others to arrive, I can just walk you through our housekeeping rules for today's webinar. So if you do experience any technical issues today, then please just use the chat box and message me directly and I'll do my best to resolve those issues for you. This is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email with the recording. So if any of your colleagues couldn't make it or you want to re-watch the session, then feel free to. And at the end, we are going to be doing a Q&A. So please drop your questions into the Q&A or into the chat box. So I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. So today we have John, who is our Senior Product Marketing Manager, and we also have Alberto, who is our Director of Product Management. I will kick it over to you, John.
Thank you very much indeed. So very warm welcome to today's session, a look at Entra Apps and the extent really to which they, if we don't have visibility and proper management of them, they can expose an organization to cyber attack. In particular, we're going to look at how one nation state threat actor, Midnight Blizzard, mounted a cyber attack on Microsoft and on other corporations as well, and how they used Entra as part of that. That's important for two reasons. First, it's important because as we know, specialist nation-state exploits are quickly copied and adopted by the mainstream cyber criminal. But it's also important because it puts the spotlight on Entra and the extent to which Entra can be used as the infrastructural soft underbelly of Microsoft 365 from a security perspective. Okay, so myself and Alberto are going to kind of hopefully open up an active discussion on this. We'll look at some best practices for securing Entra apps, and in particular, Alberto is going to walk us through the Midnight Blizzard attack. Naturally, we're also going to take a look at how CoreView can help in addressing the potential exposure here. And best of all, there's even a free tool you can use to scan your Microsoft 365 environment that we'll tell you about right at the end. Okay, so let's get started. And I guess really the most sensible place to start here is considering how Microsoft 365 security has changed over time. Well, if you look back to the launch of Office 365, for example, in I think it was 2010 or something like that, and the availability of Office applications and cloud versions of Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive, you will readily appreciate and perhaps even remember what followed was a surge, a massive surge in email attacks, including, just as one example, 300% rise in ransomware attacks due to the, shall we say, emerging nature of email security back then. Now, of course, over time, Microsoft has added layers of security, advanced threat protection, detection and response capabilities, and with the emergence of SaaS as the platform of choice, this has led to increased credential vulnerability and identity level attacks. Of course, COVID had its impact. The global pandemic saw a massive rise in remote workers and has driven Microsoft 365 adoption, frankly, faster than governance and security can really manage. And now we're seeing a rise in collaboration level attacks. I think some survey recently said that 94% of organizations have said they've experienced attacks in collaboration environments like Teams and SharePoint. And as an aside, in the UK, the cooperative food retailer, as some of you may know, was recently the subject of a massive cyber attack. And as it was trying to deal with that situation, it issued an emergency warning as the attack was playing out to its employees, regarding the use of Teams and cameras, and regarding the possible presence of threat actors in meetings. Now, um, it's recovered its operational capability, and there's no public information suggesting Teams played any direct role in that compromise. But it's an illustration of the part that collaborative tools can play, and the notice that organizations are beginning to take of the potential for them to be part of an attack. Anyway, bottom line, there's upwards of 550 million daily Azure users, and Microsoft 365 Entra Apps is emerging as a latest form of attack vector. Okay, so that's fair enough. We've taken a quick tour through history. We have an idea perhaps of what end-to-end Microsoft security should look like. Of course, we'll need access level security. So things like covering email, identity checks, data leak prevention and CASB controls, all that good stuff. But we need tenant level security across Microsoft's collaborative tools. That's assurance of the configuration of these core infrastructural components: Entra, Purview, Intune, Defender, a proper oversight in particular over those apps that are registered as part of the Entra Apps stack. And there's a reason for that, a very specific set of reasons. Why worry about Entra Apps? Well, first off, as many of you probably realize, there's an awful lot of them. Some are obvious to many of us here. Think about project management with Monday.com, or sales and management with Salesforce or HubSpot, or developer tools and apps. But many are not obvious, and organizations sometimes have thousands of Entra Apps. So that's the first thing, there's a lot of them. Secondly, however, they frequently have almost no visibility of these apps, or the owners of these apps, if indeed there are declared owners, or any vulnerabilities they might have, for example, expired secrets or certificate problems. So there's lots of these apps, there's almost no visibility of them, but there's another reason to worry about them too, or at least to take them into active consideration, and that is they frequently have powerful privileges that extend to controlling files, to accessing email and directories, privileges like permission to read and write to the corporate directory, the organization's crown jewels. And needless to say, cyber criminals know that organizations don't have control, don't have visibility over this, and so they're looking for ways to exploit the situation. For example, by searching for privileged apps, maybe creating new ones of their own to give themselves persistence once they've accessed a tenant, and also using techniques like, OAuth consent phishing, for example, to try and exploit the situation. Bottom line, if the results of this survey by Adaptive Shield are to be believed, criminals have plenty of opportunities to take advantage of privileged apps because the levels of permissions that are granted to them are potentially very high. So, with that as the context for our discussion today, I'm going to ask Alberto to take us through some Entra attack scenarios, explain precisely how attackers are using the access via these apps, and to look in detail at the Midnight Blizzard attack. So, thank you for a moment. Will I just pass control across?
Great.
Okay, so I've stopped sharing, guys.
Just give me a sec. There we go. Okay, we should be now sorted. Took more time than it should, but we are good. So thanks, John, for explaining the importance of Entra Apps and why we need to stay vigilant. As we dive into the specific attack scenario, we will see how this critical application can be really leveraged in different ways by attackers to access our environment. Each scenario that we will go through really uses a specific tactics to breach systems and maintain unauthorized access. The first one that I want to focus on is called OAuth consent phishing. So let's see how that works. So it really starts with a non-admin account takeover. So the attacks in this time targets like those kind of users without any privileged roles, and they are often perceived as less risky because they don't have like admin roles, they don't have any rights to do like proper damage on the tenant. This initial breach can really be achieved in a number of ways, like phishing or exploiting weak passwords, and provides the hackers the first step into the tenant without really triggering any immediate alarm. At this point, once they have compromised a user account, the hackers have access to all the resources that that specific user has. And what they can do, they can basically create application that act as on behalf of that user. What they can also do, and what they do in this specific attack scenario, is go ahead and use this kind of permission and the new app that they have created to list all the users, all the apps that are already available in the tenant. And this is a critical piece because the way they are going to escalate their attack level is going to be by basically mimicking an already existing application such as Calendly, Salesforce, NHR system, anything that it's already available in the tenant. So they create this malicious application that at that point won't access only to the initial user perimeter and scope. What they do is they go and do this kind of consent phishing. So they send out all these permission requests to other users that they will recognize that the application is kind of already in place in their tenant, and by providing consent to that, the application will grow and grow and grow the amount of data that the attacker has access to. And this is really scary because it really flies under the radar because of two main reasons. First of all, in an organization when you're not checking all the Entra applications that are created and all the new consent that are given, you wouldn't see any of those. At the same time, the first entry point wasn't an admin takeover, so in many cases that won't raise any red flag. This scenario, it's really an interesting blend of stealth and strategy because he starts small and then scales, escalate the privileges, accessing more and more data. Having now explored how hackers can use a user account, I'd like to now pivot to a different scenario that is a perpetual account on admin accounts. So it starts similarly, but this time the target of the first step is an admin account. This breach is really severe because of the high-level permission and controls that the hackers will gain from day zero. Unlike previous scenario, what the hacker will do straight away is create an high privileged app. This way, it will be able to still log in the tenant and still be able to have access, to maintain access to the specific tenant, even if the first breach, the one on the admin account, will be discovered. This app, this application created, can have permission like privilege access read-write all, directory read-write all, or file read-write all, which really gives extensive control over the environment. When the attacker is removed from the tenant, because like this kind of attack is really high, is really much more risky, so it's easier to be spotted from all the CM and all the controls in place in an organization. The hacker actually still have access because they can log back to the kind of second back door that they have provided through Entra application. This scenario really illustrates the critical risk posed when admin accounts are compromised. Unlike non-admin accounts, the breach of admin accounts provides really a broader, more impactful ingress point. Now let's jump to the juicy part. So while the first two attack scenario are concerning, many of you might argue that they are really less frequent, successful in environments where we all have in place security defaults, conditional access policies, VPNs, multi-factor authentication, and all our employees are well trained to spot phishing emails without hesitation. Yet, the reason why Midnight Blizzard is really interesting is because it doesn't really rely on a user clicking on a phishing email or clicking a consent on a shady app consent request. The Midnight Blizzard is really a game changer. How does it work? So let's start from the very first step. We have an hacker that is using password spraying on weak accounts. So what they are doing is basically run kind of like those dictionaries that are available everywhere, where you can try like the most frequent password. And the accounts where those dictionaries and those most frequent passwords are really much more dangerous are test tenant. So they managed to gain access to a test tenant. It wasn't a production of any company. It was like a demo tenant. Let's say like a Contoso, just like all the one that we are playing with every day. So they got access to this legacy test account. Once they got access into this legacy test account, they have identified a specifically OAuth application with a service principal that has been previously granted elevated privileges in the corporate tenant by an administrator. So what does it mean? This specific application was deprecated, has been there forever, wasn't something that anyone was looking at. But for some kind of reason, an admin provided administrative role to that specific app in the corporate tenant. And you must be all aware of that, but Midnight Blizzard happened on Microsoft itself. So what the hackers have in their hand now is a legacy account in a dev tenant with an app that has a service principal in the corporate tenant. And this is where they really started their escalation. So first of all, they have created additional application. And the reason why they have done it is really similar to the previous scenario. So when hackers gain access to a tenant, they want to have different multiple entry points so they can be more resilient. So they created this application, but at this point, this newly created application didn't have anything to do with the corporate tenant. At that point, they leverage the old app, the one with the legacy, the service principal in the corporate tenant, to create a new admin. At this point, they used the admin itself to grant consent to all of those applications, and they have granted specifically the full access as app. And this allowed the hackers to gain control over the tenant mailboxing, all the mailboxes, and access all the sensitive communication. So I think this was pretty scary when it happened. And really, let me reinforce why it is and what happened here. No interaction with there was no single interaction with any user in the corporate tenant. This was mainly due to some kind of test application that was left there in a Contoso, in a test tenant that no one was actually looking for. So this is kind of happening more than what we could say, because we ran an analysis on all our customers, and looks like 17% of all the Entra Apps that Corby manages contain a development-related identifiers such as dev, test, QA, V1, old. And all of these tags, names, and identifier are really scary because they kind of tell a story where someone had to do a specific task, maybe was raised and was really something critical. So they went outside all the different security protocols and security procedure. And then admin say, okay, I will get you global admin at the moment. I will get you like administrative roles to the specific app at the moment. We will review it afterwards. And this afterwards never comes. So this is something that is really scary for us. It happens to everyone, and we are all aware that it is, I think, like it boils down to the productivity versus security trade-off that we always talk about. So now that I show you like the worst thing that can happen with Entra Apps, let me just recap what are the three key insights on these attacks. So first of all, breached app operate under the radar. And this is because not everyone has a governance or a security process that looks as Entra Apps as we look at user sign-in, like this kind of security issues and violation that we are all used to. Second of all, is that Entra Apps are really used to create redundancy in there. Like they create really several different backdoors into the tenant to make sure that even if the first and initial breach is discovered, they have a way to log back in, so they don't lose the access. And last, test environments often have excessive permission, and they might not follow strict security standard, and can really become really something severe when the test environment is not standing on itself, but is connected because there is some kind of test and some kind of delegation between the test environment and the production one. So now that I give you all of that, I will pass it back to John, who will hopefully help us crawl back from this cybersecurity pit that I dig for all of us.
Okay, guys, just one moment while I pick up the screen again. Hopefully we're there, I believe. So first of all, I want to thank you very much. It's funny listening to that, and although we're exclusively in the world of 365, so many of the security lessons down the years come bubbling up in your mind. You know, the poorly thought through test systems that have been put together in a hurry, probably under pressure to bring new apps to market or new business functions to market quickly. The ability to gain basically global root permission, showing my age and my Unix background, the ability to gain global root permission and the ability to use that as a springboard from which to embed persistent access even as an exploit is playing out. So really interesting. Thank you, Alberto. I just want to say a few words of best practice observations here, and then I think we're going to have a little demonstration as well. So that would be great. Best practice. What can we do? What can we do when trying to give ourselves the visibility and the ability to manage all this stuff? Well, you know the old adage, just like I do. You can't secure what you can't see. Yeah. And this is particularly relevant when it comes to Entra apps. So from a discovery perspective, it's essential to know how many apps are connected to Entra, what permissions they're using, whether those permissions are delegated or app level, you know, which have read or write or read and write, or which have expired secrets or certificate problems. And this is a good one. And which of them have got owners, or if any, because it's surprising the number that don't have any at all. So there's a discovery element to best practice, but there's also an ongoing need to monitor and report that's crucial to best practice. So the ability to monitor and identify changes or unusual behaviours that might signify that something needs further investigation, and provide the ability to do that sort of sensibly and simply from a point where you can assess the risk, potentially take steps to remediate it, and basically manage the overall application life cycle. So that's what CoreView does. Now, I was planning to summarize how it does it now with a couple of very dull looking screenshots. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that actually, Alberto, you have a little demonstration ready for us. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I think it's perfect if we can
So,
jump
so
in the
let
product.
so let me stop sharing right now. Pass back to you, and you can do a lot better than I can in showing us around how we address these discovery and reporting requirements.
There we go. So this is CoreView for those one of you that didn't saw it before, and we are really starting from one of the main homepage of CoreView, which we reference it at Governance Center. So we can have over here we have an overall grade of how our whole tenant is performing based on a number of policies that CoreView provides out of the box. These policies are really meant to not only give you an assessment of what your security and governance posture is, but also to provide also remediation, so you can really have a continuous understanding of how your tenant is going. When it comes to Entra Apps, we have one of it's kind of my favorite use case, and I'm gonna deep dive into three main categories of policies that we have. We said many things in the past half an hour, and to me, when it comes to put in place a process that keeps you secure and keeps you compliant with enterprise application, your Entra Apps, you're going to have to do two things. First of all, you can disable all the creation of enterprise application and all the consent for all the users. So everyone needs to go through a global admin. And that secures the environment, right? You put all the control in place on 1, 2, 3, 4 people, and they are going to check on each specific application. But this is not really the best way to do it, because you're going to swarm your IT team in charge of that, and no one will be able to do any work other than that. What you can do is go the other way, so enabling users to provide consent and to create apps, but at the same time have in place a tool, or anyway a process that constantly scans your tenant, your environment, to surface all the new application, all the application with high privileges, and all the service principal that are gaining more and more privileges, and maybe they change roles. And this is what our Entra App playbook is doing. Let's start with this one, maybe. Enterprise application assigned with directory read write all permission. This was one of the permission that was leveraged in the Midnight Blizzard attack. So I can see here that I have 20 of those. If I click, I'm able to see a list of all those apps. And the first pass when I first install CoreView, or when I first try to do this kind of job, is gonna be like a rough cleanup for me, because not all of those applications are needs to go. Like many of those, like most of those, I'm sure that they have all the rights in place to be in a tenant, because they maybe are enabling Monday, Salesforce, like all these kind of collaboration tools. So the process here wants me to go through each one of them, check with who created that specific application, who gave right to that application, to make sure that it has all the rights. We are still using Monday, we're still using Calendly. It's not something that has been left there and no one is using. Once I have confirmation that this wholesome wooden chips service principal has all the rights to be there, what I can do is set it as a trusted item. And with CoreView, I can also set an expiration. I don't want to say like this is a trusted item forever. Maybe we do it for this year. So I set an expiration on the last day of the year, and I can also add a note here. So like John said it's needed. And at this point, I am no longer responsible for this application, because I basically have delegated the ownership and the responsibility of this specific application to the owner, which was John in this case. Once I'm happy with this, I can submit, I can do next, and as you can see, like this number is going to refresh in a second, that specific app disappeared from the list, and now I can go on with the cleanup. So what happens if I spot an application that is not needed, or is not something that I want? I can run a remediation, so I can disable that service principal. The cool thing about CoreView Playbook and CoreView Playbook Engine, which is everything that runs behind the scene over here, is that I can enable remediations, and I can also schedule remediation. So after the first pass that I've done, I can have the system run multiple times. Like every time that a new application, a new service principal, for example, is created, CoreView detects it and reaches out to maybe the owner, because I can configure it to go to the owner, goes to the owner and asks him, like, are you sure that this is needed? Should we set it as trusted item, or should we delete it? And this is really the process of having compliance, not only once or twice per year when you do this kind of cleanup that I show you, but to have like an engine or something in place that can go and scan the environment at all time, even when you're sleeping, even out of office hour, and make sure that you are compliant at all time. So when you're doing reviewing Entra Apps, the first thing that I suggest doing is reviewing like those applications with really high privileges, directory read write all, directory read write all, and read write access. The second thing that you want to do is check all the application without owners. And this is as interesting as the previous case, because you want to be able to understand who created that application. Because if you don't have an owner, you don't have anyone responsible for that application, and you have no one to actually go and chase for and understand if that application is legit, should be trusted or not. Once you're happy with like this kind of legwork, that if you've never done it, we have seen enterprises with more than 1,000 Entra Apps. and we've done it also on the core view on our own tenant, and it took a while, even if we are only a couple hundred of employees. Once you're happy, everything here will be green, and at that point, your process and your compliance can be kind of delegated to core view, because you can have put in place those kind of schedulation and remediation that I showed you, or you can log in daily and you can see that review, for example, the enterprise application added in the last 30 days. Of course, core view here provides also different kind of severity. We are labeling as critical all the policies that are tied to those high and the most risky privileges, while all the other apps that don't have like those kind of tenant scope and admin scopes privileges, you can review them like less frequently. So I think it really boils down, and it's really as easy as this to put in place a governance process that can really secures against the kind of attack scenario that I showed before. Back to you, John.
Thank you very much indeed, Alberto. That was great stuff, and much better than a couple of screenshots would have been, I think. So, yeah, basically, food for thought. Food for thought that whoever can gain access to and manipulate Entra Apps has potentially the access to the tenant and the keys to the kingdom. Now, here's the thing. We're coming to the close of our session. And I don't know, maybe you're thinking, what do I know about Entra Apps in use in my organization? Do I know everything I should? And the answer is, well, no, not enough. Then there's some really good news. With a free tool, you can use to check your environment for Entra Apps and what they're doing, and the permissions they have, the extent to which they therefore could represent some kind of exposure to you. All you need to do is visit the free tools area of the CoreView website, and it's under the resources area actually, and download the tool, and you could start checking your environment today and see how you think your risk posture, your security posture might be affected by some of the things that we've been discussing today. Okay, I believe that there's some news of an exciting new report as well. Is that the case?
Yes, so very soon, our 2025 CoreView State of Microsoft 365 Security Report is going to be released, but you have the chance to gain early access this week. So the report doesn't go out until next week, but if you scan the QR code, and I'm going to pop the link in the chat, then you can actually gain early access. So what is this report? So based on insights from over 250 IT and security leaders, this report uncovers a critical blind spot. Can you believe that over 49% of teams assume that Microsoft backs up their tenant configurations for them, but it doesn't. So by reading this report, you will gain a lot of insights. If you are responsible for Microsoft 365 security or governance, then this report is definitely something that you will want to read. So I have popped the link in the chat box, or you can use your mobile device to scan the QR code, but I think this will be an extremely valuable asset. This will also be included in the follow-up email too. So if you don't have time to scan, then after today's session, then you will be sent the recording that you can share with colleagues, and also you can download the report. So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you so much, John and Alberto. It's been a very insightful session. But before we end the call, does anyone have any questions for our speakers today? I don't think any have come through yet, but Once you receive your email, if you do have any questions, then feel free to just reply to the email with anything that pops to mind, and we'll be sure to get back to you.
Fantastic. Good.
Thanks all of you.
We've actually just had one. So one of the questions is, how often should organizations validate Entra App setup?
Ooh, do you want to take this, John, or shall I?
I think you should, Alberto.
Okay, fine. I mean, I think that we all seen that they can be so artful. We can see like how they are how entraps are leveraged by hackers. So it should be really like a continuous process of reviewing application. The tricky thing with having a process, it's really tied to the amount, like the volume of application, and what you can do with what you can and what you cannot do with admin with Microsoft on the Entra D portal. That's why we kind of build these functionalities in core view. It was really asked by a lot of all our customers, and they are all loving it. So I think like the answer to be as secure as possible, and is never 100% secure. You always will have the risk of a breach, but it's all about like lowering lowering the risk, lowering the attack surface, and being able to come back fast from a breach. With that in mind, with that goal, I would say that having a process that continuously scans your Entra Apps is something that's really needed, especially for more secure organization.
I think as well, at the risk of conflating two things, we know there are regulatory and legislative frameworks in action now across the world, across Europe, in Asia Pacific, in the United States, um, which are requiring organizations to perform fairly regular risk management assessments. And something like this, or the output from this, should probably form part of that risk management assessment. As a matter of course, just because it's kind of behind the scenes, just because it's not on the desktop or an endpoint or whatever, doesn't preclude it from being a part of that process, I'd suggest.
Actually had another question too. So what are some good procedures to continuously monitor the custom Entra apps and its permissions?
I I would say what we shown. It's not about the tool that you choose. You can have custom PowerShell. You can build your own solution. You can have a workforce logging in and refreshing every second the admin center on Microsoft side. It's just about not thinking that running like that compliance assessment once or twice per year is enough, because the moment you completed the assessment and you know that you are secure and the whole picture is perfect, the moment anyone adds a new service principal, grant consent to an app, or creates a new app, your whole security score, or like the feeling that okay, my environment is secure, is no longer the right picture, because that specific new application can be something that is not legit, maybe is not malicious, or is not being planted there by hackers or anything like that, but it's just one of us, one of those kind of engineer that needs to do really something in a really short time and has been asked for a favor. Okay, let's grant admin rights, global admin rights for the moment. We'll review it afterwards. And again, that moment never happens.
We've got another question. So how would organizations know if any of their custom Entra apps have been compromised if there are no detections set up for it?
That's another interesting question. I think like when you're looking to that, like the two main thing that I would monitor is this sprawl of Entra Apps. as you've seen, one of the most common technique is one. Now that I have access to your tenant because of admin accounts that I breached or a user account that I breached, Entra Apps are really interesting because they don't trigger the alarm of creating user and stealing those kind of credentials, but they kind of fly below the radar if you don't have like a governance protocol on the Entra Apps, which up to last year was something which many organizations didn't, and looks like Microsoft itself didn't. So that can be something. And other than that, seeing again, monitoring your Entra Apps, you will be able to see some kind of weird like phishing application, just like maybe a duplicate of a Calendly, Monday, or like those kind of really popular SaaS app with like maybe weird permission. Anyway, I think like it really boils down to this.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your questions. If there's no more, we'll give it a minute to see if anyone has any more. Or if not, like I said, after the session, if anything springs to mind at all, then feel free to just reply to the follow-up email with the recording, and I'll make sure that someone answers your query straight away. I think that's it. But thank you so much, John and Alberto, so much. And hopefully we'll see everyone at the next webinar.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.